Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ofer. I'm coming from Nice, and I guess that I'm what is standing between you and lunch. So I have this privilege today. So I will try to do it quick, efficient, interesting, perhaps a little bit funny, and then we can all go to lunch. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that, obviously we have a problem. We are all sitting here or having this conference. This is the industry, the customer service industry, and I have the privilege of being in or participating in similar events in the UK, in the US, in other places in the world. And obviously we have a challenge. And from all the different booths, different stands that we have outside, there is one that is missing. And this is the one of our customers. There is no booth out there for the consumers. But if we could have a stand, a booth for the consumers, and we could hear what they have to say, I guess that we would be hearing something like this. Like this.
One moment, please. Let me get my supervisor.
Oh, we can't help you here. Let's transfer you to the next person. Then the next person can't help you, so they transfer you back.
We can't take your call at this time.
Always on hold for like 2 hours.
That's frustrating as hell.
Pain in the ass.
Oh my God, they drive me crazy.
Frustration.
You tell them what the problem is and you can't understand what their response back is. And when you ask to speak to their manager, you're put on hold for about 10 minutes.
We spent the entire night on the phone going from one call center to another call center, being disconnected, getting weird tones and beeps.
For more options, press 1.
Oh, I hate the robots. I just screamed, operator, 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 press 0 a few times.
Press 1, press 2, you missed it, you didn't hear very well, then you got to start all over again. No, I'm an old-fashioned.
I just hit 0 as fast as I can, 0 star, 0 star.
In Japan, it's service-oriented company, so if you do something like that, like put the hold on customer, they never buy their company's product. Here, it's just people so used to shitty customer service, let's say.
Well, the customer's always supposed to be right, isn't that right?
So I think that the reality is that wherever the market is, it could be Russia, it could be the United Kingdom, it could be France, I think we have a problem as an industry because customers are unhappy. This is the reality. Now, a lot of effort, a lot of investment is being made all the time. Of course, from the previous year, a lot of money has been put into budgets, into projects to try and improve the customer service, to introduce new technologies, but still something is not really working. And I would like to share with you today some of our experience or tips, perhaps, on how to get closer to the customers, to the consumers, with some help from advanced technologies. And we believe that this could make some change in the customer experience. So when we are talking about customers and we want to focus on the consumers, we need to understand that the reality today is quite complex. Customers are using so many different channels. So one customer experience is broken into so many small pieces. But customers expect eventually the same experience to be consistent. Whatever they experienced, said, shared with the company in the retail shop, they expect the same thing in the call center, on the website, and so forth. And this is where we usually, as service providers, are a bit struggling. So how do we get closer to our customers? I think it's not easy. And if we look at this diagram that is based on a survey that we are running every year with consumers, with your customers, across different verticals, we see that the reality is very, very complex. So we asked consumers 2 questions. One is, which channel will you use to first contact the company, the service provider? What is your first channel of choice? And we see that the web is probably becoming the first channel of choice. By the way, all the different self-service channels are the preferred channels by the customers. But the more interesting information we have from this diagram is what happens if the first channel fails. If I'm trying to do something on the web, in an email, on the IVR, and I fail, what will be the next channel that I will be using? And here we see something quite amazing, considering all the research and talks about the death of the call center or the death of the voice interaction. What we see is that actually the call center is now becoming even more busy, much busier, from all the deflection from the other channels. So in a way, the call center, this box in the middle, is becoming the preferred second channel by consumers. And we can see here, 46% deflection from the web to the call center. 51% from the retail shop to the call center. So one, we have increasing volumes of interactions coming to the call center. But two, and this is more important, those interactions are becoming much more complex, much more difficult to handle, because those are the second interactions. Usually after the customer have researched our website, got some information from the retail shop, did his homework, and then called the call center. Surprising the poor agent with lots of questions, lots of very detailed questions that usually they struggle to answer. This is the reality, the deflection to the call center and the multi-channel experience. And when we have a closer look, what happens during the life cycle of a typical customer, this example is coming from a telco, a mobile provider, but we see what happens during the life cycle of the customer, of the consumer. We see that this middle part, all this area, after the initial purchase of the service, is very, very complex. We see the interactions of the customer jumping from the online to the retail shop to the call center and so forth. This is the full nature of the challenge. Those bouncing backs between different channels at the typical life cycle of a customer. And this is where, in the middle of the life cycle, where customers really make their decision whether to extend the contract, to be loyal, to continue to another year or another period of service, or to move across the street to your competitor. So the goal is quite simple, obvious. We want to get closer to the customer. We want to understand what they want in order to get them loyal. And we believe that the key over here is what we call the decisive moment, is to use those opportunities where we have them on the phone, we have them visiting our website, we have them touching the company, the interactions, and control it to the maximum. Or in another word, to own the decisive moment of customer service in those touch points. Now, how do we do this? Very difficult. Somehow we need to make sure that we have the right people in the right place, our best skilled, trained, experienced agents or customer service people at the right place, at the right time, with the most appropriate, the most relevant solution, the most relevant offer for the customer. How do we do this? So again, perhaps moving more now to the solution side of this presentation, not so much the challenge, which is clear, but how some innovative solutions can bring a possible a resolution to those old challenges. What if we could take all those different decisive moments, all those different touch points. It could be social media, it could be other digital or self-service channels, it could be a visit to the retail shop or a call to the call center, and bring them all together. And what I mean here is understanding all those interactions, putting them in the right order to really construct, rebuild the complete picture of the customer experience and impact it, influence it at the moment of truth. There are 3 dimensions to such a possible solution. The first one is really to understand what are the building blocks of this customer journey. The second thing is the ability to understand what is influencing the experience, what is really happening deep inside each of those touch points. And the third is to take all this information, all those insights, and do something with them. If I'll start with the first challenge or the first element of such a solution, this is really constructing the customer journey. I would like to share with you the results of one of our customers. This is taken from Sprint in the US, a real customer. And this is the statistics from 1 week of their call center activity, of their call center operation. Of course, Sprint, being the largest telco in the United States, probably the biggest in the world, has a lot of interactions coming. For one of their call centers, in 1 week, they had this middle part. They had more than 324,000 voice interactions. Now today, this information is very clear, very easy to get. We know how many calls we are getting. But we usually don't have the before and the after of the picture. So what we could tell Sprint is the before of those 324,000 calls. And we could say actually that something like 20% of them, 17.8 calls, or percent of those calls, originated from a visit to the Sprint website. And out of those web visits, 9.9 were about the invoicing. We could also tell that social media was also a first step to many of the consumers before they called the call center. So we see here 5.4, 17,000 people visited the Facebook, tweeted something about their experience with Sprint before calling the call center. Extremely important, but this is again half of the picture. This is the before. Also interesting to see what those customers, those consumers do after. And we see that 32.4% of those calls continue to another call to the call center. 11.9 resulted in another email. Very concerning, 2.8 of those consumers left the company, churned Sprint after the initial call to the call center. So this is just a snapshot of the before and after of calls coming to the call center. You could argue that a lot of this information is already available today from CRM systems. Yes, to some extent. But usually it doesn't cover all the channels. And especially it doesn't reconstruct, it doesn't build the complete customer journey like we do, for example, here. So we take those 324,000 calls and we break it to the different individual scenarios, different directions that customers could take. So if I'm taking the first example above, this is the example of customers that didn't do anything before calling the call center, and then they had another call to the call center. So voice interaction followed by a voice interaction. The second one started with a web, followed by 2 calls, and so forth. And when we click at each one of those directions, those scenarios, we see a breakdown of individual customers that took this journey. And from here, we could play back the complete touch points, starting from a full capture of the web visit to a full playback of the voice conversation and the second voice conversation, and so forth. It could be also an email, it could be a chat, it could be a tweet. So we have the full picture, we have the big picture, but we have the individual customer experience. Moving on, once we have this very, very powerful information, once we gathered all this information and put it in the right order, most probably we could start making some predictions. The big trends are starting to come up to the surface. And here we have an example of such a trend that could be easily identified. So we have customers calling to activate their iPhone. And we could say, just because we are gathering all this big data, to say that most probably, most customers, 72 hours later, will call again to activate their email account. Now, if we have this information, of course, then the most logical thing to do would be to take a proactive approach, to tell the agents what to do, and of course, to try to avoid this second call. Through real-time guidance, real-time analytics and real-time guidance, we could save the next call. We could save the customer from churning. We could save a negative social media activity, and so forth. So the predictive analytics is based on the multi-channel analytics as the first step. The second element of such a solution, and again, this is an example from Sprint, is really around what we call interaction analytics. There is a lot of hype, a lot of buzzwords, flying around analytics, but perhaps just to spend a few seconds on this, what analytics really means is the ability to analyze the content of the interactions. So all those things that are simply not in the CRM or the transactional information. So things like emotion, like sentiment, like root cause are very, very difficult to understand from voice, from unstructured information. So if we take a typical challenge that call centers are faced with, why do I have an increase in the volume of calls? So transaction analytics, all the CRM and the BI solutions could give us a lot of information about those increased volumes of calls. They could say things about the demographics, about the plans the people are, those consumers are taking, and so forth. They could not tell us anything about the actual content of the calls. If the customers are unhappy, if they said something during the call about the competition, those things that are not documented anywhere and are typically or usually lost. So those are the two sides of the full picture of the customer experience. And the third element really is to do something with those insights, with this information. And this goes through different elements of action. It could be targeted coaching to the agents, how to better handle those more complex calls that are coming. It could be perhaps some real-time guidance to the agents on their desktop at the moment of truth to better handle the complex calls. And it could be even engaging with the customer through SMS, through email, or any other media following the call to make sure that the experience is, again, followed up or converted into a positive experience as soon as possible after the interaction. Those are just few examples of closing the loop, really, taking all this information from the big data analytics and doing something proactive with them. The benefits here are quite clear. I guess it goes without saying that if we get it right, the efficiency, the customer loyalty, and also the sales conversion will all benefit. And this is what we see with Sprint and other customers that are using those advanced technologies. So really, kind of trying to summarize what it's all about, getting closer to the customer. I guess it's going through all those points that I mentioned during this short session. I will leave this still on the screen for you to read. But we believe, and we have customers that are already starting to see a difference, to see a change, an improvement in the way they handle the core, the critical challenge of customer experience using those as advanced technologies. And we are very happy to meet you. We have a booth outside, and we'll be very happy to elaborate and to discuss how all this great stuff can also possibly be at your service.